UN Charter, the multilateral treaty. Perhaps the most important multilateral treaty we have today is the UN Charter. And so when we use that as our frame of reference to de-escalate, to return to the peaceful status quo, I think that's our best bet on seeking or enabling the resumption of the peaceful political dynamic in this region.
And since you're speaking of negotiations, since before we move to questions locally, since you were speaking of negotiations, do you think, or do you agree with observers who were saying that it got difficult after what happened, that during negotiations Iran got hit, so it's more difficult now to get back on the table?
It's more difficult to get back on the table now?
To negotiate, especially after they were hit during the times of negotiations. Do you agree with that?
There was a recent Wall Street Journal article that talked about the current Trump administration's policy regarding conducting international politics, and it's quite concerning actually, because they mentioned how they seek to, whenever there is a regime they don't agree with, and so we can reference Venezuela here, they would go seek to remove the leader, and so they'd not necessarily launch a full-scale war on the ground, but simply remove, I think the title of that Wall Street Journal article, I forgot who wrote it, but it was quite recent, removing the leadership. And so if we look at what they did recently, they did attack the leadership of Iran. They're not launching a full-scale war. They don't have a ground invasion as of now, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But they have assassinated the political leaders. They have assassinated important military figures, the political leaders. And in that article, they mentioned how they're hoping that the public and the new leadership would be aligned, their political inclinations would be aligned with the inclinations of the American leadership. That seems to have worked in Venezuela. The new political leadership in Venezuela seems to be getting along with the American attitude towards international politics. I don't think they'll be able to succeed in Iran. And so I think the best hope right now is to, number one, seek de-escalation. Number two, ensure the safe passage of oil in the region. That's not going to secure our
paralyzed ships.
Exactly.
They have to be safe
in the Strait of Hormuz. Exactly. We need to secure that, which is in America's interest as well. And so we could focus on the common interests between both the United States, us, the Gulf states, and the Islamic Republic of Iran to resume the peaceful dynamic in this region.
So most important things now is the safe passage, which comes second, and first one is de-escalation, especially for us. So now, if we go locally, and our government has done tremendous efforts, far beyond expectations, in response to the conflict. So, in response to the evolving conflict and everything that has happened, the Kuwaiti cabinet has decided to monitor local and regional development, let's say, by the clock or through permanent sessions. Okay, and we've seen that. So how do you look at that? From which perspective, and how do you evaluate the efforts exerted locally?
So I actually haven't done any formal research. I haven't conducted any field research, but I can give you my general impression based on my interaction with colleagues, with friends, with family, with what I've been seeing on the media. And there was an initial, when the conflict first started, there was an initial sense of panic. People were worried. But through the consistent signaling, through the media channels, through even on social media, the calmness quickly spread in Kuwait. And so to the extent that sometimes I talk to people and they forget that there are tensions and going on around us, that we are subject to certain attacks from a neighboring country, which is a red line. We know this is our country, we have to protect it. But the initial panic that I think Kuwaitis were feeling has disappeared, and a sense of calmness has gradually come back. We're still listening to the sirens. I think there was one actually today that I heard.
Just one earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. And but overall, I sense that the Kuwaiti, the residents in Kuwait, irrespective of whether they're Kuwaiti or non-Kuwaiti, they're feeling calmer now, given the responsiveness of the security forces, the armed forces, the firefighters, and even the media, the media channels. They're sending consistent signals that things are under control and that there's no need to panic. We should be vigilant, we should be aware, but panicking is not going to help anyone.
So you have also noticed the role of media now that has been in terms of delivering short, precise and accurate information.
Definitely.
Yeah. And now we'll get back to more questions and elaborative answers from you, but let us take a quick break and come back to you, Doctor.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانيا بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Since the first signs of the current situation, the Ministry of Health has activated its emergency health plans and raised readiness levels across all healthcare facilities. According to the Ministry of Health's official spokesperson, Dr. Abdullah Sanad, Kuwait's health system is operating at full capacity and readiness, coordinating across the country's network of public institutions. As-Sanad said that Health Operations Room is working around the clock to monitor the developments and coordinate medical responses.
In response to the series of Iranian missile and drone attacks starting in late February 2026, the Ministry of Health has activated emergency protocols to manage casualties and ensure the continuity of medical services. The ministry has been in a state of continuous vigilance and high readiness to treat individuals injured by falling shrapnel and debris from intercepted threats. Emergency departments at Al Adan Hospital and Al Jahra Hospital were designated to receive initial casualties, while patients requiring advanced medical intervention have been transferred to Jabr Hospital. Meanwhile, the surgical teams at Al Adan Hospital were placed on high alert, with several urgent surgeries performed on patients with trauma from shrapnel and fractures. As for the triage guidance, the ministry has urged the public to visit primary health care centers for non-urgent cases to keep hospital emergency rooms clear for critical injuries. To support the sudden increase in medical demand, the ministry has secured essential supplies, affirming that the strategic reserve of blood and blood components is maintained as safe levels. The ministry also stressed that emergency plans for the central administration of blood transfusion were activated, including extending hours at donation centers, which collected over 2,000 units in early March. Regarding the medical supplies, the ministry announced that operational plans are in place to ensure an uninterrupted supply of medications and medical equipment across all facilities. On the other hand, the ministry has implemented several administrative and safety measures to protect patients and staff, mainly the enhanced security in which public hospitals have enforced stricter visitor policies, including a maximum of 2 visitors per patient, mandatory screening, and 24/7 CCTV monitoring. The ministry noted that outpatient clinics continue to operate and medications are being dispensed according to the scheduled appointments to maintain routine care alongside the emergency response. Meanwhile, authorities are emphasizing mental health, providing guidance on coping with the stress and trauma caused by air raid sirens and regional instability. Amid intensive efforts, the Ministry of Health maintains direct 24-hour coordination with other government bodies, including the Kuwait Ministry of Defense and the Cabinet, to integrate decision-making during the crisis. For his part, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Abdullah Sanad, held several meetings and briefings to provide updates on the nation's healthcare system, including emergency preparedness, public health campaigns, and the introduction of digital health services. Dr. Assenad has emphasized that the Kuwaiti healthcare system is operating at full capacity, with 7 public hospitals, 14 specialized centers, and 118 primary healthcare centers on high alert. He has reported on the coordination of emergency and intensive care units, ensuring a stable 49% occupancy rate in the hospitals, and managing a steady supply of blood units. The spokesperson has promoted the launch of the Salim app, which enables citizens and residents to securely book appointments and access health records, replacing the previous Sahha app.
And viewers, we are back here in the studio with our special guest right here, Dr. Abdulaziz. We're back, and we need to focus now more on the local before we get to the regional segment. Doctor, on the occasion of the last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan, His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Mish'al al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah, may Allah protect and bless him, has emphasized the importance of unity and vigilance during the times and the circumstances the state of Kuwait is going through. How do you read the noble directives by His Highness the Emir?
The noble directives by His Highness the Emir are very wise, and I recall watching it. It was in Arabic, and you mentioned unity and vigilance, but there was also a third, the first point he mentioned, which was al-wa'i, or awareness. And awareness is extremely important in these circumstances. They're important at both the individual level, at the administrative level, at all levels, especially when the stakes are high. And I usually tell my students whenever I cover public policy, whenever I cover game theory in my classes, that even when you're presented with different alternatives that are all negative, through awareness, you'll be able to organize the alternatives in front of you, even if they're all bad, in terms of the least bad to the most bad. And so you could pick the rational outcome. The point of being aware, the first point is to pursue to end up with the rational outcome, which is the optimal outcome, the beneficial outcome.
And now, Doctor, if we look at the regional matter, the Arab League has condemned the Iranian attacks, the heinous Iranian attacks and missiles on the GCC nations, and called them a massive strategic error and a violation of the sovereignty. So how important is it to unify the political stances among the Arab states?
It's important. It's not always the case that you have unity. I mean, if we look back at the history of Kuwait back in 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we had a resolution at the UN Security Council. It was resolution number 678. And there were some Arab states in the UN Security Council that refused to endorse the activation of Chapter 7 for the liberation of Kuwait. And so, although unity is desired, it would present a positive front showing that we're all on the same page, we're seeking the same outcome, and it's important, it would benefit us. Sometimes we won't end up having that. So what's important is just to maintain the general trend, having most of the Arab states, hopefully the crushing majority, maintain a unified stance towards the aggression and condemn it for the violation of our territories. The state of Kuwait, it has been made clear that it is not allowing foreign governments to use our land, our air, or sea for the launching of attacks. So we're not allowing any country to use our territory to launch attacks against another country.
And we're not even a party.
We're not a party to the conflict. And so having other states attack us is unjustified. And like we mentioned earlier in the interview, Kuwait has a right to defend itself according to Article 51 of the UN Charter. No state should violate the UN Charter by, if we refer back to the two articles I want to refer to frequently in this interview are 2.4, Article 2, Paragraph 4, and Article 51. States should not be violating 2.4. They should be respecting the sovereignty of other states. They should be cooperating and pursuing the peace and good neighborly relations with the other states around them.
But Doctor, let's stay on this question for a little bit more. If you could tell me also the importance, since we're speaking about the unity of Arab countries, doesn't it help through the international institutions that we have more in our stance as well, in line with our stance? For example, through the international organizations, whether be it the UN and whether be it the Security Council, in terms of the voting that happens or anything like that. It does help, right? Even internationally.
Certainly, certainly. Having a unified stance in any situation will send, at the end, it's all about the signaling. The signal we transmit to other entities, other groups. And so when we communicate a signal, when we try to communicate a message, and it's apparent that there is no consensus among us, that there is a huge division, that signal will not be as powerful. But when there is a widespread consensus, when we have 90% of the Arab League or 100% of the Arab League maintain a certain position, that signal, when it's transmitted, when it's sent to the other international groups, they will say that the Arab bloc has made its stance clear, it's made its position clear, and that would help us. It would make us look more confident about where we stand, and that there is unity in that regard, which would help consolidate whatever it is we're trying to communicate.
Exactly, and this is where unity plays its role.
Yes.
Yeah, and from an international legal perspective, Doctor, from an international legal perspective, how would the parties to the conflict view this kind of escalation and developments?
So that's a big question. And so we refer to the UN Charter, we refer to Article 2, Paragraph 4, we refer to Article 51 about self-defense. Unfortunately, we're getting certain signals from the United States showing that they're willing to abrogate these basics, certain aspects of the UN Charter, many aspects of the UN Charter actually. There was a recent interview by the American ambassador to the Zionist entity, Mike Huckabee, where he was presented with a map of what's known as an expanded, the Greater Israel, and he said that he doesn't have a problem with that, which has major implications for what they think of the Charter, what they think of Article 2.4. And so some students, some spectators might think that this means that international law is dead. They might think that international law is no longer, which is not necessarily the case. When there is no international law to apply, that's in the Latin phrases, it's called a lacuna, that there is an empty space and we don't know how to fill it. But that's not necessarily the case. We have to be clear. What the United States and the Zionist entity might be pursuing is a return to an older version of international law. And so the entire international community, the European states, the Arab states, the Africans, the Asians, the Latin Americans, might be pursuing the current charter, the current norms. They might be embracing the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, the International Bill of Human Rights, thinking that these are the norms that you want to subscribe to. But the United States is the most powerful country in the world in terms of economy, military, and so on. And they seem to be signaling their readiness to embrace an older version of international law, which is the colonial version. The colonial version of international law viewed the world in terms of civilized and barbaric people, civilized and savage people, and that the norms of treating the others, the idea of sovereign equality, which is also mentioned in the UN Charter, doesn't exist. They would treat the other group as someone who's beneath them that they could conquer. And so when the US ambassador to Israel was presented with that map of a greater Zionist entity, and he said he does not have a problem with that, that's reminiscent of that colonial version of international law, where the Europeans would go expand into different territories and imagine them as terra, it's a Latin phrase as well, it's called terra nullius, which is territory with no people. Although there are people here. We are people in Kuwait, we are people in Saudi, Lebanon, the Palestinian territories. There are people living there, but they want to imagine it as empty space that they can take over.
That's clear. Doctor, I want to spend a little bit more time on this, and I'll get back to you. But let us take our correspondent, Mohammed Sawagh, who's on field right now. Now, before we continue our discussion with our guest in the studio, let's switch to the live stream with our correspondent, Mohammed Sawagh, right now. Mohammed Sawagh, if you are listening to me, tell us the latest updates you have.
Yes, Abdul Rahman, I'm listening to you. Thank you very much for having me. And I would like to say that I'm here in Shuwaykh industrial area where all the business are running smoothly and normal. According to the people who's working here, business are normal, and most of the people are shopping for Eid, preparing for Eid al-Fitr. And some of the business owners, they told me that in this year it have something special, which is like most of the sellings are being through the online applications and websites. I've seen some officials, government officials are running around the market to check about the prices and the goods if there is anything missing. And I've seen the police, traffic police, they are here to organize the traffic roads.
Mohammed Al-Sawagh, the area seems busy from where you are. So what have you witnessed exactly? What are people doing at your area? Is it shopping mostly?
Well, I have been witnessing the people here doing their normal shopping, and I've seen people going to the coffee shop, restaurants, and some people here are buying buying foods and buying some goods for their houses.
Mm-hmm. And Mohammed, the same question usually ask you, since you are one of the also most active on-field reporters and have also visited many places. So what message would you give to the public, since you have seen several places in the state of Kuwait?
Yes, I would like to tell the people, according to what I have seen through my field reporting, that everything is under control. Life in here are normally, and people should get their information from the official sources and stay calm.
Mm-hmm. And Mohammed, before we let you go, when you are right now at your scene, you haven't noticed any unusual activity of the people. They're acting very normal, in opposition to the rumors that are out there, right?
Nothing is unusual here. Everything is normal. People are living their life normally, and it's another day in Ramadan. Just people are preparing for Eid al-Fitr.
Mohammed Al-Sawagh, be safe, and thank you for the latest updates. A quick break and we will be back.
أخاطبكم في هذه الليلة بصفتي أبا وقائدا ومسؤولا أمام الله تعالى ثم أمامكم عن أمن دولة الكويت وأمانها في فترة تشهد فيها المنطقة تطورات متسارعة وتوترات متزايدة وتصعيدا غير مسبوق ينجم عنها تداعيات تستوجب من الجميع أعلى درجات الوعي واليقظة والثقة. فالوعي بما يجري حولنا لم يعد خيارا، بل ضرورة وطنية تمكننا من قراءة التطورات بدقة وفهم.
As part of the state's efforts to grant flexibility for schools, students and teachers during the current regional crisis, the Ministry of Education adopted a number of decisions, including shifting to online learning while postponing exams until further notice. Minister of Education Sayyid Jalal Al-Tabtabai emphasized that these efforts reflect a sense of responsibility and a commitment to our students' well-being.
In response to rising regional tensions and attacks involving Iran, the Ministry of Education implemented several measures to ensure the safety of students and staff, starting with shifting to online learning, in which all public and private schools, as well as universities, including Kuwait University and Abdullah Salim University, transitioned to remote learning via Microsoft Teams until further notice, due to the current regional crisis. The ministry emphasized the importance of students and teachers attending and participating in classes via the Teams platform, and stressed the necessity of continued monitoring by school administrations to ensure the desired educational benefits are achieved during the distance learning period. Postponement of exams is another measure that the ministry took, in which all short exams and quizzes will be suspended until further notice. As for operational procedures, the ministry decided that school days were scheduled to begin at 9:30 a.m., in line with the timings of the holy month of Ramadan, with lessons lasting 25 minutes during the remote learning period. Regarding the staff reductions, the ministry decided to reduce the staff in education-related departments in conjunction with other government bodies. As part of its safety plan, the ministry has activated field emergency plans and prepared for 90 shelter centers, supervised by civil defense teams. The ministry stated that the situation will be reassessed in the coming period, stressing that the decisions are made in favor of the students and to maintain the stability of the educational process. For his part, Minister of Education Sayyid Jalal Al-Tabtabai chaired several meetings with a host of senior officials at the ministry to discuss the emergency plan, while listening to a detailed explanation of the distance learning mechanism, the level of interaction in virtual classes, and the attendance rates of students and teachers on the educational platform, in addition to the challenges that some schools may face and the mechanisms for addressing them to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of the educational process. The Minister of Education commended the significant roles of the staff across all sectors of the ministry and praised the roles of teaching and administrative staff as well as school administrations in monitoring students and ensuring the continuity of their studies despite the challenges. The minister emphasized that these efforts reflect a sense of responsibility and a commitment to our students' well-being. Minister Al-Tabtabai also acknowledged the important role of parents in supporting their children during the implementation of the distance learning system, calling for continued cooperation between families and schools to enhance student discipline, academic progress, and optimal educational outcomes.
Dear viewers, we are back and we have breaking news by the Civil Aviation, which announces that drone targeted Kuwait International Airport, sadly. But thankfully, alhamdulillah, there is no casualty reported. And for now, always listen to the official sources and do not panic. Always listen to the official statements, and may God protect the state of Kuwait. And now, dear viewers, let us continue our discussion with Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Msallam here at our studio. Doctor, welcome back again. So, Doctor, we'll get to the question or the discussion we were having. As I told you, we'd like to spend more time on it, where you were telling me how they were, the US and Israeli occupation would like to get back to the traditional way, the colonial way, or the way you named it. Yep. So, I wanted to mention something and out of your curiosity. So how do you think with the switch that we had post 1990 between from geopolitics to geoeconomics, so the classical way of seeking military war by land, for example, to having economic sanctions and stuff like that, do you think is it possible, as you were saying, that they go back to the traditional ways?
To revive, is it possible for us to revive the strength of the UN Charter? I think it's very, very possible. I think it's very possible for us to return to ensuring that the multilateral treaties like the UN Charter, and there is another important multilateral treaty that we can mention here, which is the Rome Statute. But we've noticed some states right now willing to assail them. We've mentioned how the United States and the Zionist entity are willing to, let's say, undermine the UN Charter. We've also seen some states with the Rome Statute, which is a criminal court, an international criminal court, that would prosecute people that are responsible for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression.
Like we've seen with Netanyahu.
Exactly, and so he's wanted by the ICC. And what's fascinating is that when the arrest warrant was issued, for Netanyahu, there was an obligation for the member states of the Rome Statute to arrest this wanted person and send him to trial, to have him be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. What became fascinating was that many European states, when that person, Milikowski or Netanyahu, who's landed in those some European states like Hungary, for example, they refused to abide by the terms of the treaty. Article 59, I believe it's 59.1 of the Rome Statute. You can look it up. The viewer can look it up. There's an obligation for the member state to apprehend the person that's wanted and send him for trial. When they knew that they had that obligation towards that person, they said, actually, he's our ally. We don't want to apply that term to our ally. They seem to be willing to apply it to Arab leaders, African leaders, Asian leaders, someone who's not European, but they don't want to apply to someone they consider an ally. Now, to answer your question, is it possible to go back to upholding the rule of law, the plain meaning of the law, with the appropriate intentions, the proper intentions in our interpretation of the law? The answer is yes, very easily yes. But it depends on the politics of the powerful states. Right now, it's the United States. There is a huge Zionist influence on the US Congress, on the executive branch as well. There's a website, a fantastic website called apactracker.com, and it shows you that over 70 or 75% of the US Congress and the House of Representatives, the lower house, is receiving aid from or receiving money from that pressure group, from that lobby. And over, I think, 90% of the Senate, Majlis Shuyukh, is receiving money from that lobby. And so with this influence, this Zionist influence on the world's most powerful states, we'll find that there is a willingness to abandon these international conventions, abandon perhaps the most important one for the occupied Palestinian territories is Geneva 4, Article 49(6) of Geneva 4, 49 paragraph 6. It says that the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its civilian population into the territory it occupies. Now, the Zionist entity has been doing this for the past, since day one of its existence. It takes its people and sends it to the territory it occupies. They want to displace, they want to remove the original inhabitants and bring in a new people, which is classic colonialism, classic settler colonialism. It's the same thing the Americans did with the Native Americans, what the British did with people in New Zealand and Australia and so on. So is it possible to go back to the proper interpretation of the UN Charter, of the Hague Conventions, of the Geneva Conventions? The answer is yes, but we need the proper leadership. We need the country at the top of the power pyramid to keep sending the signals, just as any authority, the Kuwaiti authorities, the GCC authorities, the Arab authorities, send signals to their people to provide reassurance, just as how we mentioned earlier in the interview, people on day one were feeling a sense of panic, but then they calmed down after there was constant reassurance from the authorities that things are under control and that panic will not help anyone. The same thing applies at the international level. When the world's most powerful state indicates that it's willing to abandon the humanitarian law, willing to abandon the genuine interpretation, the decent interpretation of Article 2.4 and Article 51, only through that proper interpretation would we, or not we, but the rest of the world would feel that we can stick to the plain meaning of those conventions and apply them the way they were meant to be applied.
Yeah. And now moving from the detailed explanation you have given us around the international institutions and US and Israeli occupation, back to the Gulf, Doctor. Lots of observers have been discussing the topic of whether or not it is in the interest of the GCC is to respond or get into as a party to this war. What is your take on that?
It's a categorical no, plain and simple no. This no does not mean that we don't have a right to defend ourselves. It means that we, as you just mentioned right now, there was an attack on Kuwait Airport. I think you just mentioned.
Radars. On the radars,
on the radars.
So, civil aviation, on the radars of Kuwait Airport.
So the Gulf states, Kuwait, all the Gulf states, any country has the right to defend itself against any incoming attack. Now, does that mean that we want to seek an escalation, seek the deterioration? If there is a path, there is an option in front of us where we can try and revive the diplomatic communication to de-escalate and reassure the party that thinks that things are going to continue deteriorating, reassure them that that's not necessarily the case. We might be able to revive the peace and maintain a strong, consolidated peace. If we can simply communicate that to them and have this conflict, let's be clear, was provoked by the United States. Have the initial provoker also jump on this.
Alongside the Israeli occupation.
Sorry, say that again?
I mean, you would say alongside the Israeli occupation.
It's interconnected. It's interconnected. Like I mentioned, the Zionist entity, through its lobby, through its pressure, now openly, it's all documented. This is not speculation, by the way. Like I mentioned earlier, on APAC Tracker, you'll be able to document, no speculation at all, how the money is influencing these these decisions on the US Congress, on the executive branch. And so if we're simply able to have the United States jump on the idea that this conflict is not to their benefits, show them that the skyrocketing oil prices will not benefit them. The American citizen does not want to pay more at the gas pump. And show them that by de-escalating, all the parties will benefit, all the parties will be happier. The only party that might not be happier is the Zionist entity. For some reason, they like seeing conflict, they like violating basic rights of the others that they, according to the colonial logic, they consider barbarians or savages. Today's term, they've replaced barbarian and savage with the term terrorist. Although some people can objectively be classified as terrorist, they seem to be willing to use it more broadly, even when there is a group that simply wants to live. The people in the occupied Palestinian territories, many of them just want to have a normal life. They want to live in their home, on their farm, and live a normal life. But the Zionist entity is saying that no, we will violate Article 49, Paragraph 6 of the Geneva Convention, Geneva 4, and remove you from this land in hope of bringing in a European person to replace, a European Jew to replace you. And so when there is widespread consensus that this is something that we're not willing to accept, that we want to stick to the International Bill of Human Rights, we want to accept and embrace the notion of sovereign equality, of respect of international law as applied in the modern period, not in the colonial period, because the colonial period doesn't serve us. In the colonial period, we had the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, right? And that we want to abandon that and embrace the new norms that would secure more justice, more fairness, even for states that are not at the top of the power pyramid.
So just to make it clear, an answer to this question, a categorical no to contribution to
escalation.
To escalation, yeah.
To escalation,
you
yes.
have been calling for de-escalation.
Exactly.
Since the beginning. So Doctor, now moving, I mean, as we have heard earlier, we had a report on the Ministry of Education and its efforts. So the Ministry of Education, Doctor, if we speak a little bit more locally now, has done several or took temporary precautionary measures like suspending exams or doing online learning just for the coming period at least until further notice to maintain the safety of everyone. So what is the impact of the current circumstances on students and academic staff, and what do you think of such precautionary measures?
I think they're suitable measures, and the transfer to or the switch to online learning is not new. We've experienced it before during the COVID pandemic.
COVID-19.
And both, I think, the teachers and maybe a smaller portion of the students are already familiar with using the program of Microsoft Teams. They're already familiar with getting assignments through that programs. And so if we want to be optimistic about this, we can say that the academics, the teachers are hitting the ground running. They've well experienced, they know how to deal with this, they know how to take attendance using that program.
They've been there.
They've been there,
yeah.
As to put it quite simply, they've been there. And some of the students, many of them have graduated because COVID, time flies, it was, what now, 6 years ago?
A few years ago,
yeah. And some of them, so many of them have graduated, but some of them might still be, remember from their experience with the COVID teaching online. In general, the online teaching will not be able, as an academic, the academic will not be able to communicate the information to the student as well when it's through online. It's still a great alternative, given the current circumstances, given the emergency that the state is experiencing and the Gulf is experiencing. But the direct teaching, having it in the classroom, having the student in front of you, making eye contact with them, and calling out on them, or calling them out and having them answer the question that you have in mind will ultimately result in more awareness. And they've done studies on this. There is a fantastic study done by MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that attached, I forget what the entire name is called. It's called EEG scans. EEG, I forget what EEG stands for. But they basically look at the electric signals going on in the student's brain when they're relying on simply online learning and when they're using artificial intelligence to answer homeworks and write their papers. Because when it's distance learning, they might be more inclined to use the chat GPT or the large language modules. And let's say, depend on that more than depending on themselves. Now, they've discovered through that study that the electric signals in the brain have decreased when they're depending on those large language modules. But when the student is in front of me in the classroom and I'm calling his name out and I'm asking him to answer the question on the board, he doesn't have time to open up the program and seek an answer. He'll have to depend on himself, depend on the extent he's understood the matter. And so there will be more electric signals in the brain going on. So in terms of knowledge accumulation, in terms of knowledge competition, in terms of ending up with better results, the regular in-class environment is better than the online. But still, the online is a fantastic alternative, and I think that both the academics and the students are very happy to, like you said, we've been there before, to hit the ground running. They know how to do this.
But Doctor, as an academic and assistant professor at KU, don't you think that the online is, from your perspective, of course, don't you think that the online teaching is better for the professors or assistant professors at KU than teachers who teach at schools, in a sense that the students who are doing academic stuff, for example, humanities studies or some things like that, it's more inclined to self-reliance, self-study than actually in schools. Do you agree with that, or how do you see it?
I'm going to say no. I do believe that having the student in front of the teacher, having the teacher be able to see if the student is willing to respond to a question and see the extent he's willing to think critically beyond the readings. Because what I want to do as an academic is we assign readings. We want to make sure that the student has looked up the material we're covering for the class. And the extent the student is able to build on that, show me that they've mastered these readings, that they've understood them, and the extent they're able to think critically on how it relates to a current problem. Because these readings have all been written in the past. And so they can tie what's been discussed, a writing by, for example, a colonial author, and how it's relevant to the present day, to explain the current dynamic between the settlers and the occupied people in the occupied Palestinian territories. I want to see how he can use that. Now, if it's online,
you want to see how they have approached it,
how they're confident, how they're able to think on their feet, how they're able to show me they're willing to think critically. This is all very important, especially since I'm actually writing a paper right now looking at standardized test scores for different groups, looking at what's known as the Graduate Record Examination, the GRE. And unfortunately, when we do a scatter plot looking at the GDP per capita and the GRE score, there is a clear positive trend. The wealthier a country is, the better the score is, except for a cluster of states, very wealthy but perform very poorly, which is the Gulf Cooperation Council states. We have great money, we have great resources in terms of finances, but unfortunately that hasn't reflected on our ability to achieve the appropriate, the competitive test scores, which makes me feel a little upset. I wish that when I look at the Kuwaiti youth, the high schoolers, the university graduates, and when I put them in a competition, an international competition, that we're going to be at least average or above average. But unfortunately, right now, we're actually a little bit underperforming. And that's why I think that ensuring the quality in education will help us in Kuwait achieve one of the objectives, one of Kuwait's objectives, one of the Gulf Cooperation Council's objectives, which is having a knowledge-based economy. We don't want to have an economy that's simply based on the export of oil resources. We want a knowledge-based economy. And if the student is relying on the distance, on having the education be online, and then they resort to all the questions to answer on a large language model, it's going to be very difficult to think that that future generation will help us transition to a knowledge-based economy.
Yeah, that's clear. Well, that's actually clear for the online learning, Doctor, and the precautionary measures that the Ministry of Education has taken. And now, Doctor, if we go back to the topic of the war in Iran, as we are still in this topic, the war is not only affecting the Iranians, as we know, it's also affecting and having big risks and threats on the whole region, including GCC states, Lebanon, and of course Jordan and other countries, and the Palestinian occupied territories. Would you tell us more on that? So
yeah, we can tie this back to the security of the area. I mentioned earlier in the interview this idea that the Zionist entity seeks to expand the map that of Greater Israel that that's been shared in the media, and that the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, has discussed with a TV personality. I think his name is Tucker Carlson. They discussed this greater map, and the ambassador said, "I don't mind," and he referenced holy text. He referenced biblical and maybe the Torah, talking about how this is guaranteed. This is God's land for the chosen people, according to his perspective. So what this means for us is that thankfully we have the international statutes, like I mentioned. We have all these multilateral treaties and the sources of international law. There are 4 sources mentioned in the ICJ statute, but the 2 main ones, the 2 main sources of international law, are treaties and custom. And so right now I've mentioned a lot of treaties. I mentioned the Charter, the Rome Statute, the International Bill of Human Rights, the Hague Convention, the Geneva Convention. But there's also another important source of international law, which is customary international law. And the customary international law can help us remind, and not only through our reference to the statutes, but also the custom, remind those willing to violate the current norms that this is unacceptable. This expansionary settler colonial project, this escalation in the region, what the United States and the Zionist entity might try to do is persuade other countries that they're attacking Iran through Article 51, which is a very fascinating twist. They would say that we're not violating the Charter, but we're defending ourselves through Article 51, because Article 51 talks about self-defense.
Yes.
They say we're attacking Iran using 51 because of self-defense.
Absolutely.
And so this is a very peculiar interpretation of Article 51. But through custom, we'll be able to let those states willing to, let's say, pervert the law, that your interpretation might not be the appropriate one. We should continue seeking diplomatic, peaceful approaches to any disagreement that we have, and return to the peaceful status quo.
And Doctor, now let's move to the strikes, the heinous strikes by Iranians on us, the GCC states, 6 GCC states. They claim that the aim was to, whether be it pressure the US as they're hitting their bases in the Gulf, which is not the situation as we are seeing right now. It's gone beyond that. So could you tell us, from your perspective, about the strikes that have been happening on the GCC exactly, since we are not in the party and we have not even done anything, we're just self-defending? And also if you could tell us what miscalculation Iran have gone through.
Sure. I can maybe tell you about it more generally. I haven't looked into the details, but they are totally unjustified. Attacking the civilian infrastructure, it's a clear violation of the international humanitarian law. Kuwait has made it clear, like I mentioned earlier, that we're not allowing any foreign entity to launch attacks against Iran, so they can't claim self-defense. They shouldn't be attacking places in Kuwait City. They shouldn't be attacking residential areas. They shouldn't be launching all these drones and missiles against the Gulf states. And so this is unjustifiable, and these, like I mentioned, the Gulf states have a right to defend themselves against these attacks. And what we can do is remind the Islamic Republic of Iran that Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, again, this is the key message I want to communicate in this interview, is that Article 2.4 is very important given the current dynamics, current escalation in the area. Article 2.4 should not be violated. Neighboring states should not be using force against other states, and they should not even threaten to use force against other states. And so if there is a disagreement, they can try and resolve it diplomatically through the diplomatic channels. And if they have a disagreement with the United States or the Zionist entity, they can sort it out through whatever means they consider necessary. But it should be, again, remind them that we are not a part of this conflict. We are not engaging in this conflict. We haven't allowed any foreign entity to launch the strikes. According to official channels, I believe it's been made clear by the Kuwaiti authorities that we're not allowing anyone to launch attacks from our land, sea or air against them. If it was a different scenario, if it was a different case, the Iranians would say we have justification to respond. But as of now, the official message is that we're not enabling any attack from our territories, and therefore they should not be attacking the Gulf states, given that we're not enabling attacks from our territories.
That's clear, Doctor. Thank you for the elaborative answer. We'll get a short break and come back to you.
الثقة فهي الأساس الذي تقوم عليه قوة الدولة. الثقة بين القيادة والشعب وبمؤسسات الدولة وأجهزتها، وإن وحدتنا الوطنية هي خط الدفاع الأول، وتماسكنا هو الضمان الحقيقي في هذه الأوقات لمواجهة التحديات وتجاوز الأزمات.
Remains in a state of precarious limbo, and the initiation of a broader conflict between the United States, the Israeli occupation, and Iran on February 28th has effectively paused critical negotiations regarding US President Donald Trump's peace plan. While the Board of Peace initiative designed to oversee the reconstruction and governing of post-war Gaza has moved into early implementation with project tenders for refugee villages and international troop base, the top-level diplomatic efforts to finalize the disarmament of Hamas have stalled. Here's the story.
Talks to advance U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza war have been on hold since the last 2 weeks, when the U.S. and the Zionist entity jointly attacked Iran, sparking a broader Middle East war. The pause threatens to stall implementation of Trump's flagship Middle East peace initiative, which has cast a major foreign policy objective. It comes less than a month after he secured billions of dollars in pledges for Gaza from the Arab states, countries that are now facing Iranian attacks as the conflict widens. Trump's Gaza plan has hinged in part on whether Hamas would lay down their arms in exchange for amnesty, a step intended to pave the way for reconstruction and further military withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces. Negotiations on this end and other issues were paused when the Iran war began on February 28. However, some White House officials denied that there had been any pause in the talks, saying that discussions on disarmament are ongoing and positive, while all of the mediators agree that this is a critical step to enable rebuilding for the people of Gaza. According to sources that have direct knowledge of work by Trump's Board of Peace mission, the brief pause was caused by minor delay that occurred due to flight disruptions, which prevented mediators and representatives from traveling around the region. The sources noted that the Board of Peace believes the war could accelerate a resolution of the disarmament issue by removing Iranian influence, which has long supported Hamas financially. Meanwhile, Palestinian sources said that Hamas had been expected to hold talks with Egyptian, Qatari, and Turkish mediators on the day the war erupted, but the meeting was scrapped and no new date has been set. Hamas confirmed that talks on Trump's Gaza plan had been frozen for now, indicating that the situation in the region has impacted some travel, but discussions and progress continue. On the Palestinian-occupied territories, Israeli-occupied forces have eased off strikes in the Gaza Strip since the start of the bombing campaigns in Iran and Lebanon, but have not ceased their brutal attacks that left dozens of Palestinian civilians killed and injured across the Strip.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة، معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماماً ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانيا بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Now we're back, dear viewers, with our special guest here in the studio, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Musallam. We're back with you and would like to know more about the relations between countries in the conflict and the coming political phase in the region and worldwide. Doctor, since your work focuses on international relations.
Sure. There's certain theories that we can apply. The most dominant theory in international relations is what's known as the balancing paradigm, the realist balancing approach to international relations, which I am not a fan of. I greatly dislike it because it is pseudoscientific. It's not very helpful for making predictions about how international relations will develop. And it's very, let's say, humanities focused. It's based on remembering names and remembering dates. But when it actually comes to asking the student or the academic to predict what they think will happen in a certain region, using the balancing paradigm, the outcome is 50-50. You're better off flipping a coin. And that's why I usually advocate for the more scientifically robust framework for understanding international relations, which is the power transition theory developed by an academic called Organsky. He envisions the world in terms of a hierarchy with the dominant state deciding what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And right now that dominant state is the United States. It's been the dominant state since the end of the Second World War. And so that's why we might find that the application of the law, of international law, might be not always clear, where, for example, when there was the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, issued a judgment in favor of Nicaragua against the United States back in, I think, the 60s or 70s. So the United States can simply say that we're not going to abide by this world court order because it's the most powerful country in the world. Now, had the ICJ issued a judgment against a weaker country, the most powerful state might say, no, we're going to come and apply it. Kuwait was very lucky in 1990 when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. The most powerful country in the world decided to uphold international law and activate Chapter 7 of the UN Charter to liberate Kuwait. Now, we were lucky back in the 90s. But what does this mean for countries that are not aligned with the United States? We can imagine some countries that are not satisfied. They're not on the American side. What does international law mean for them? It means that they might not benefit from the guarantees that international law provides. And in the future, power transition theory envisions that the country at the top of the power pyramid, which is right now the United States, might not be there forever. In the future, we might have another superpower. There are certain countries that are vying for power, vying for rising up to the top.
So it does acknowledge the rise of China, for example.
Exactly. You beat me to it. So right now, when we look at the economic indicators for the most powerful countries, the gap between China and the United States back in 1990, 1994 was gigantic. China was making 7% of the US GDP. Today, it's making 70 or 80% of the US GDP. So it's greatly minimized the gap in economic power. We also look at artificial intelligence, the patents for artificial intelligence. Some are even indicating that China has beat the United States in that regard. And some are expecting that in the next maybe few years, maybe a few decades, China might surpass the United States in terms of superpower. So what does that mean when China rises to the top? I have a paper actually published in 2024 where I look at the voting behavior at the United Nations General Assembly of the Gulf states on one hand and other regions, the Latin American bloc, the African bloc, and so on, and the extent they overlap with the Americans on one side and the Chinese on the other. And what I found in that research paper, published in the Journal for the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula Studies, is that the Gulf states actually have more overlap in their voting behavior with the Chinese than they do with the
In what
Americans.
sense? In what sense?
In all senses. When we talk about human rights, when we talk about economy, when we talk about trade, when we talk about security, in all these categories, the UN General Assembly would be related to a certain topic. When you break down all these votes from I look at the voting record from the foundation of the UN up until 2023 or 2024, so for a long period of time. And I find that the voting inclinations of the Gulf states, of the Latin American bloc, of the African bloc, of the Asian bloc in general, is more inclined to be in agreement with the Chinese voting behavior than it is the United States. Of the blocs, the Europeans are more in agreement with the Americans. The European bloc, the white bloc, is more in agreement with the Americans than it is with China. But they're the exception. Everyone else around the globe seems to be in agreement with the Chinese more. And so if we use that as a proxy, if we use that as an indicator for what the future might look like in the event of a successful power transition, in the event of a successful Chinese rise to remove the American superpower today, it seems to me, based on that research, based on the study of voting behavior, that a big chunk of the world, except for Europeans, will be actually maybe happier with the rise of China. But again, this is based on the voting behavior proxy, the General Assembly voting behavior, which might not capture other aspects. I only use that as a proxy, and the voting behavior indicated that we as the Gulf states and other parts of the world are actually more in agreement with the Chinese than we are with the Americans. And maybe we can use that as an indicator that we would be more satisfied in the event of a successful power transition.
So does this power transition theory differ to the other international relations theories such as realism and other theories?
So realism is a broad term. You have what's known as the balancing realism, and then you have the power transition realism. The balancing realism is very humanities based. Like I mentioned, you read it and you can cover the different versions of realism. There's the classical realism, there's the neo-realism, there's the neoclassical realism, there's the offensive realism and the defensive realism. And I keep telling my students, it's in Arabic we call it mataha. You know, it's a maze.
It's a maze.
You want to make sense of it. You want to use it to predict relations. You want to use it to think about how the law will be better guaranteed in the future, whether there's going to be peace or conflict. And like I said, you just throw a coin and you'll have the same outcome. It's not very helpful. It's good in terms of showing that you're well-read, that you're cultured, that you know the names of these authors, but not much for predictive
so the power transition is different?
Power transition is based on empiricism.
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 Okay.
It's an empirical approach. It starts off with a game theoretic approach and an empirical approach to determine how we can explain international relations. There is no mystery involved with power transition. It's more direct. It's more presented as, take it as it is. And so with power transition, I believe it's the most appropriate theory for understanding the relations in the Gulf states and international relations in general.
So what you're saying is that power transition is more realistic to understanding reality than realism itself.
Yeah, you can say realism is a misnomer. Realism has been hijacked by historians, and we love historians. I used to cover history. I used to be a history aficionado, and we can't produce appropriate political science without sufficient history. We need the history. It's essential. It's absolutely essential. However, for the purposes of prediction, التنبؤ, we need empiricism. We need that aspect so we can confidently say that this is what we expect in the future. Through the old balancing paradigm that Waltz and what's his name, Morgenthau, Waltz and others, and Farid Zakaria and different authors, you look at their work and you say, okay, how can I predict a certain dynamic in this area? And it's not very helpful. You'll end up with a lot of words, writing a lot of huge word count at the bottom of your Word document, but then you try to give it to the policymaker. I'm always imagining the situation where I'm in front of Antonio Guterres, I'm in front of the policymaker, and he's telling me, as an academic, how can you help me deal with this problem? I don't want to give him a story. I don't want to give him a story time for him to read, to waste 2 hours.
Give him key points.
I want to give him a clear policy directive, a clear association between how the independent variables and the dependent variables are related. I want to show him a scatter plot and tell him that if we adopt this policy, we'll end up with X, Y, and Z. If we want to secure peace, let's pursue X, Y, and Z. But if I adopt the balance of power paradigm, and I hope my old colleagues at school are not upset because some of them like the balance of power paradigm, but it's not going to be very helpful for providing policy. If we're in front of a prime minister, of a world leader, and he's saying, help me make or adopt a policy that will fix this problem. Using the humanities approach will not be very helpful. What you need is a scientific approach, an empirical approach, a statistical approach to deal with the problem. He's telling me, okay, show me the trend on how to fix increased rate of traffic fatalities, how to improve educational indicators, how to increase security, how to compete better in terms of improving, I don't know, air quality, whatever metric you want to use. Show me the scatter plot, show me the data. That's all done through empiricism. And we can combine empiricism with the social sciences. Unfortunately, maybe some would hesitate to look at numbers. They're allergic to numbers. They don't like numbers. And when you go through that, adopt that route as a pure approach, that's problematic. I keep emphasizing the importance of mixed methods, where you have the humanities approach, the qualitative dimension, but also you should combine it with the quantitative.
So, Doctor, to sum up this, the answer in a few words, can we say that the power transition theory would suggest, not in my words, that based on this hierarchy system, world hierarchy system, the US is at the top. So for that reason, the current or future political phase would be like the US, since it's at the top of the hierarchy. It will be the determinant factor of this war, whether be it a ceasefire, whether be it an end to the war, whether be it an ease to shipping lanes at Hormuz, whether be it an ease of sanctions, anything. Would it suggest that? Or would you suggest that?
It's a big part of it. The country at the top of Organsky's power pyramid will have immense say on how things develop. So we notice whenever the United States decides to pursue something, the rest of the international community, the Europeans, look at Trump with his Board of Peace. The Board of Peace is an alternative to institutions, to mechanisms that are already there that we can rely on to ensure the peace, to ensure the idea of a two-state solution for the occupied Palestinian people. But if he says, I want to create this, people, the other world or the other states might be willing to jump on the bandwagon and play along. Now, why has the United States been perhaps showing more maybe we can call it erratic behavior? I'm not sure if we have the time, but I want to mention a Supreme Court decision in the United States. In 2010, there was a Supreme Court decision called Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, Citizens United versus the FEC, which was voted on by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is made up of 9 judges. It was a very close call, 5 versus 4. And those 5 judges voted in favor of removing some of the restrictions on the corporations, on the billionaire class in the United States. And so when you have billionaires in the United States influencing politics, influencing elections with less restrictions, you can end up with what we're seeing today, with the more extreme approach to politics that we're witnessing today. And perhaps if that decision by the Supreme Court is overturned, the Supreme Court reverses its decision and places more restriction on the billionaire class, on those with a lot of money, we'll have a revival of the common sense understanding of what democracy is. Because it's been clear, it's been proven academically. There's a famous paper by Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page that talks about how it doesn't matter if the majority of Americans want a certain policy. It will not happen unless the billionaires want it, unless the corporate America wants it. And so if those restrictions on those very affluent individuals are put back in place, maybe we'll go back to the old normal, we'll go back to the old understanding of international law, where the US leaders show a greater willingness to abide by the UN Charter, the humanitarian conventions and so on, and resist the more, let's say, erratic situation that we're witnessing right now.
Well, Doctor, that's clear. Now, before we conclude our interview, what is your message to the people of Kuwait and people and the region as well during such hard times, Doctor?
My message would be to be aware. I like the aware point that was mentioned by His Highness. It's very important. Some people might not be aware that they've received a piece of doctored images or videos and they share it. Be careful about sharing those. If you see something, shrapnel on the ground, if you see a missile or something like that, don't be documenting that because there are dangers that follow. The person recording that and sharing it might be sending to the enemy, might be sending to the other groups, other people that don't wish well to our territory. The extent that projectile was successful. And so be aware of your actions. Be sure that you're not sending information that's inaccurate to spread panic among the society, and hope. I guess the last point is just hope. Hope that we have a quick de-escalation and a return to a peaceful status quo.
Inshallah, that ends with everyone safe and stable. Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Musallam, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Dear viewers, this brings us to the end of our exclusive coverage for tonight. Stay tuned for more news and updates with my colleague Mohammed Al-Jasmi at our latest main news bulletin. At the same time, we have other news special coverage tomorrow as well on a daily basis to give you the latest developments. We would like to also extend our gratitude to our guests in the studio. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we will be back.